Why do we love and cherish Ron Paul here? Among many reasons. He put out his weekly update. He does a phone update that you can download, his congressional updates. He calls it the Texas Straight Talk, Don.
Right.
And I made me aware this week it was all about, guess what? Maryanne Godboldo.
Yeah.
And mental health screening.
The great thing about Ron Paul, and we talk about the politics of Ron Paul quite often, whether it's about monetary policy, whether it's about foreign policy. I think there may be some people, maybe some new listeners that are listening to us going, wow, there's a lot of talk about politics. Why do you like Ron Paul so much? Well, the one thing that stands out with Ron Paul is that he is a very accomplished fighter for health freedom. And this week's Texas Straight Talk is a perfect example of the things that you hear from Ron Paul that you will never hear from any of the other candidates that are running for president.
Yeah, they're not even in the same atmosphere, the rarefied air of liberty. And in this case, it reminds me, and we're going to play some clips here, a long clip from Dr. Ron Paul talking about this mental health screening. One of the first interviews I did with him, almost 10 years ago now, was about the Texas Algorithm Project, all about forced mental health screening, mandatory universal mental health screening for children, which he said would feed into these psychiatric drugs that were dangerous. This physician speaks out boldly, like no other candidate for any office, about the dangers of the pharmaceutical industrial complex. God bless Dr. Ron Paul. Listen to this, and you'll understand why we appreciate him well beyond just the scope of any normal politics.
Maryanne Godboldo, a mother in Michigan, noticed that pills prescribed by her daughter's doctor were making her condition worse, not better. So Mrs. Godboldo stopped giving them to her. That's when the trouble began. When Child Protective Services bureaucrats became aware that the girl was not receiving her prescribed medication, they decided the child should be taken away from her mother's custody on grounds of medical neglect. When Mrs. Godboldo refused to surrender her daughter to the state, CPS enlisted the help of a police SWAT team. On March 24th of this year, a 12-hour standoff ensued, and young Ariana was taken into custody. The drug involved risperidol, a neuroleptic antipsychotic medication with numerous known side effects. The mother had decided on a more holistic approach for her daughter. She is still engaged in a costly legal battle with the state over Ariana's treatment and custody. This is just one example of how government's increasing proclivity to medicate children with questionable psychiatric drugs violates the rights of parents. Just recently, the Government Accountability Office released a report on the astonishingly high rate of prescriptions for psychotropic drugs for children in the foster care system. It is absolutely astounding that nearly 40% of kids in foster care are on psychotropic drugs, some of them taking up to 5 different pills at a time. Some of these children are under 1 year of age, too young to safely take over-the-counter cold medications. To fight this dangerous trend, I reintroduced the Parental Consent Act of 2011, H.R. 2769, which prohibits federal funds from being used to establish or implement any universal or mandatory mental health or psychiatric screening program. The previous administration pushed hard for this type of federal intrusion into the medical decisions of family through its widely misnamed New Freedom Commission on Mental Health. Everyone interested in parental rights and true health freedom must fight to make sure the Commission's findings and dubious psychiatric science are never used as justification to force mental health screening on American kids at school without their parents' consent. There's been a persistent lobbying effort funded by pharmaceutical companies to increase the number of these prescriptions to even more children. A universal screening program is the stated goal of these lobbyists. I would not be at all surprised to see the recent attention to the issue of schoolyard bullying used as a tool toward these ends. Imagine the potential ramifications of a universal mandatory psychiatric health screening program in a public school, considering how some bureaucrats are wont to behave. The diagnostic criteria for many mental illnesses remain vague and subjective. Therefore, it is all too easy for a bureaucrat in a white coat to label a child with some sort of psychiatric syndrome simply because they were having a bad day or behaving as a typical rambunctious child. That label could follow them around the rest of their school career and come with a number of prescriptions attached with the state, as the Godboldo case may try to force parents to administer whether they want to or not. I plan to continue the fight to ban federal funding of any universal screening program that imposes mental health screening on children without expressed informed consent from parents.
All right, that is incredible.
Well, there you go. And again, who else are you going to hear this from?
No,
you're not going to hear Newt Gingrich say anything about this. Mitt Romney, Michelle Bachmann. Even with Michelle Bachmann going after Perry, over the HPV, thing. I don't think there's anybody on that stage that would even begin to understand, this
they've never looked into this issue
like Ron Paul does.
John, they've never looked into these issues at all.
No.
It's absolutely incredible. As I said, he's been consistent 10 years ago now. I interviewed him on this very subject, and he warned what was going to happen on so many areas and so many levels. He's been right. And yet we have these nitpicky one single issue voters. And we're going to talk about that. Remember yesterday, Mike Adams brought up the gal who's like all about abortion. And Liam Sheff had an experience like that recently, too, with my friend Richard Pearl on the radio the other night. And I want to talk to Liam about this because this is just greatly upsetting. It's like, come on, you're willing to drug children, and yet your only issue is that you can take them out in utero?
Right.
And this is the crazy stuff that's going on here, Don. We got a lot of healing to do in this country, a lot of sense that needs to be brought back in. I am grateful that people are waking up to this message, but I wanted to play that entire message so that people that don't get it, why we do cover Ron Paul here like nowhere else in media, is because of things like that update that you just heard.
Absolutely. And if there's anybody out there that's riding the fence, on who to vote for and who to support in this campaign, then I think if after hearing that, they have a really good idea who we should get behind.
Well, Don, thanks for helping me kick it off. We got Liam Sheff coming back momentarily. We're going to talk about some positive things about villages producing more energy they can use, more food that they can use in cities, growing them everywhere. We'll talk more Ron Paul healing. We've got the electric universe coming up as well. And maybe even a moment of duh from our friends up north. Wow, what a show. Stay with us. RobertScottBell.com, naturalnewsradio.com. Put your email address in there as well. And 866-939-BELL if you have any questions or comments. Coming right back after this.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.